Hello and welcome back to the Brain Balance Parents Know webinar series. I'm Dr. Rebecca Jackson. I'm the host of this series, and today we are joined by not one, but two extraordinary guests that I'm just thrilled to be having you both here to join us in conversation. March is National Nutrition Month. So we decided to take this month to really dig into how nutrition impacts how we feel and function. Nutrition is a very important part of what we do here at Brain Balance. And we do strongly believe that there are many different ways and many different avenues to impact the brain, to impact how you feel and function. So we wanted to expand our knowledge, expand our insights by visiting with both of you. As we were talking about before we began, we think there's so many different ways to change and impact the brain, and we want parents and kids and teens and adults to know what options are there out there. There's no one silver bullet. There's no one right path for every person, and what's right for you may be different than what's right for somebody else. But I think knowing the options out there and learning just can provide just additional knowledge, empowerment, and choices for paths forward to really live your best life. So that's our goal and purpose of today's conversation is to learn from the two of you. So let me do quick introductions and then we'll jump right into our conversation. Dr. Jacques Jospitre, I'll do his bio in just a second, but I had the pleasure of meeting Jacques. We were on an ADHD panel for a cognitive assessment company about a year ago, and so got to speak alongside one another and then got to connect and meet after that. And just such a kind, knowledgeable, professional that just cares so deeply about the work you do and advancing things forward to help your patients and the people you work with. And then Dr. Jospitre met Dr. Bongiorno at an integrative medical health conference where Dr. Bongiorno was a speaker and Dr. Jospitre was blown away and really walked away feeling like, oh my gosh, this guy really knows this stuff. So for Jacques to feel that way after listening to you speak, I'm excited to get to know a little bit more about you as well here today. And the two of them work in Soho MD in Manhattan. So just a quick introduction, Dr. Jacques Jospitre is a board certified psychiatrist and the founder of Soho MD, a leading integrative psychiatry practice. He has a medical degree from Mount Sinai School of Medicine and advanced training in functional medicine. He takes a holistic approach to mental health, and his practice emphasizes the interplay of nutrition, genetics, and physical health in achieving mental well-being. He's considered a pioneer in blending both traditional with functional medicine and is passionate about helping individuals live their fullest lives by addressing the root causes of mental health challenges. And then we have Dr. Peter Bongiorno, and I keep practicing saying his name. It's beautiful and I don't do it justice. Dr. Peter is a doctor of naturopathic medicine and a master of science in acupuncture, who's also passionate about supporting clients in their journey and uses individualized treatment plans, blending compassion with the determination to pinpoint and address underlying causes for the client's concerns. And his goal is to inspire clients so that healing can occur. So thank you both for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Pleasure.
So I always like to start by just getting to know a little bit about the background and our listeners can hear a little bit about you. You know, I find it interesting where some people set out on a journey and know exactly what they want to be and do when they grow up. For others, it's a winding path. I'd like to hear from both of you. How did you end up, Jacques, not only in psychiatry, but then really bringing in the integrative functional medicine side of things to the work you do in psychiatry?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, thanks for having me on and having us on. So my path after college, when I went to grad school, my goal was actually to be a CEO of a biotech company. And that was my original plan. So I started off as an MD PhD student working on a PhD in neuroscience, and I started doing an MBA program in addition to that. I ended up finishing with the MD and the MBA. And then over time, I just gravitated towards psychiatry because it just, as a person, I'd always been interested in helping others, thinking about, how to inspire others, and psychiatry really fit my personality. And so that was, it shifted from being the CEO of this company to let me go into psychiatry, let me help people, let me understand how I could inspire people to live their best lives. And so I did that, finished residency, and then eventually I made my way into practice. And what happened was I was working with patients. I was doing all the best practices according to the guidelines, and there were patients who just weren't getting better. And so for me, it was very frustrating. I'm like, what am I doing wrong? Like, I'm looking at the literature, I'm looking at what you can do, and yet there was this gap in the care where, despite following all the guidelines, everything to the T, a lot of patients weren't responding. And that's what took me down the road to integrative health and functional medicine, where I started to see the missing pieces of how nutrition, how lifestyle, how all these other, thoughts about, health really needed to be put together with conventional medicine for me to see much better outcomes with patients.
Fascinating. I mean, clearly driven. I mean, to start life wanting to be the CEO of a biotech company, you had a vision, but always so interesting to hear the path that life takes you on. So Dr. Peter, same question for you.
Yeah, I think, well, I went through college with an interest in medicine, and but by my third year of college, I, have done volunteering in hospitals and a little bit of research. I wasn't sure I wanted to go into it, so I have uh, the only thing I really loved was music. So I told my Italian immigrant parents, I said, I'm not going to go to medical school. I want to play in a rock band, and they were very excited about that. Didn't talk to me for a couple of months, and during that time, I decided, well, let me learn a little bit more about medicine and research. So I did some research for a little while at Yale University and in the Veterans Hospital there. They had an affiliation with the Veterans Hospital. And from there, my mentor there went down to the National Institutes of Health and the Mental Health Institute. And so I got to do some research down there, and we studied about basically the middle of the brain where the stress system kind of resides, and how inflammation affects the stress system, and all of these things. And this was in the 1990s, so there wasn't really a lot known about that. And I had no interest in natural medicine at the time. But while I was there and playing in the band, I had a girlfriend who was diagnosed with chronic progressive multiple sclerosis, which is the more difficult kind of multiple sclerosis. We were both about 23 at the time. She was very sick, was having trouble walking. And they basically told her, well, there's not much we could do here. Make sure you get a good wheelchair. And and so she, through a friend of hers at the time, she was going to school for a PhD, had told her about this doctor who does what was called naturopathic medicine, which I'd never heard of before, and honestly sounded like quackery to me. And we went for a visit, and he talked to her about stress and about the foods you eat and inflammation, how inflammation can increase when the foods aren't healthy and you're too stressed out. And he looked at me, he goes, oh, you do research. He goes, why don't you go look up these articles? And one of the articles he told me about was this 40-year study by this guy named Swank from Germany, and one of the German neurology journals, about how he put people on a low saturated, high polyunsaturated fat diet, gave them a multiple vitamin, I think some B vitamins. And over that 40 years, from around 42 or 43 into the 80s, he saw much lower exacerbation rates of multiple sclerosis versus the people who got just the conventional care at the time. And that was kind of my aha moment. I'm sitting there at NIH, reviewing, at the time I think it was on microfiche, right? Remember microfiche? So
I've heard of it.
so all the younger kids going, what's microfiche? And so anyway, and that was interesting to me. So that was kind of my aha moment of, oh wow, I want to study this. This is interesting to me. It makes sense scientifically. I saw her get better, and that was my movement into natural medicines. I went to a naturopathic school, and when I got out and I started a practice in New York as a naturopathic doctor and acupuncturist, what I found was most people that came in to see me were on some kind of either benzodiazepine, an anti-anxiety medication, or some kind of antidepressant. And whatever they came in for, they typically also had mental health issues. So I started looking things up and writing articles and papers, and eventually wrote a book or two. And that's how I got more interested in mental health. And it's really been an exciting journey. And I met Jacques in 2017, and it's just been really phenomenal experience learning from him and just watching holistic and natural medicine grow, and people who are interested in the underlying causes of why people don't feel well and how to help heal those. So
Yeah.
really
Well,
exciting.
I find it interesting. Thank you so much for sharing that. I find it so interesting where there's people that seek the holistic, more natural route first, and it's maybe a difference in personality type, right? Where or upbringing, who knows? But for myself, I'm always gonna, if I have a headache, I'm gonna try to think through. Have I had enough water? Did I get enough sleep? I'm gonna try to think through things. And then there's other people that I think end up looking towards more non-conventional options when they've tried the conventional route, haven't gotten to where they want to, and are feeling stuck. So I think it's so important either way for people to just know there are other options and other paths forward. I want to touch on inflammation. You brought it up in the conversation with the gal that you knew with multiple sclerosis.
Mm-hmm.
Inflammation is something that we hear a lot about, but I think there's these terms that get tossed around that we're familiar with, but I don't think we always have a really great understanding of what is the true impact of inflammation, not just on physical health, not just on cardiovascular health, but make the connection for us between inflammation and mental health.
Yeah, I mean, so inflammation, when it occurs, it depletes a lot of resources in the body. So the body's, to function properly, it's trying to eradicate inflammation. And so once anything that's causing that depletes the body of other resources that are used to help make neurotransmitters and other factors. So it gets in the way of the normal functioning of the body. And that's why anything you could do to help alleviate inflammation allows your body to operate better. That's kind of an overarching view of it. But Peter, if you want to.
Yeah, just bringing it more specifically to mental health. That's a really, I really like actually thinking about it that way. That makes so much sense. When I think about mental health, like for example, there are studies in about the microbiome, the bacteria in the gut. And what they show in people with anxiety is they typically have bacteria that produce a lot more inflammation, right? So what does that mean? That means that there's this firefight going on in the digestive system. And as a result, oftentimes we can't absorb the food we need to absorb. And signals get sent from the gut to the brain that actually inflame areas of the brain that are responsible for our stress system. So when there's a lot of this firefight going on, it's sending a signal to our brain saying, hey, there's some threat here, be vigilant, feel anxious, and so I think what in time we're going to realize that most conditions have an aspect of inflammation to them, and they're probably, the way there's an endocrinologist and the way there's a gastroenterologist, there's going to be an inflammologist, or maybe, is that the right word? Inflammologist.
You coined it here today.
So yeah, we coined it here. So you heard it here first, because that's really a large piece of why so many people don't feel well.
Yeah, maybe rheumatology might be the domain where that a lot of that would fit into. But I think inflammation, I think I've heard of mechanisms where it depletes BH4, which is then used in the formation of different neurotransmitters, and so different people have different perspectives in terms of why it's having these impacts on the overall mood and mental health of patients.
Sure. So that leads me to another question on my list is, you brought up neurotransmitters. So I'm going to bring us now to the gut-brain connection. I think, again, this is another term. I mean, you see articles about it in pop culture, not just in the scientific journals. And I think the fact that you can buy kefir at the local grocery store and not just at the neighborhood co-op, the fact that so many people take probiotics today, I think there's a increased general level of awareness of the importance of gut health, but at a high level, talk to us a little bit about the importance of the gut-brain connection, and again, why that has such an impact on how we feel and function.
Yeah, well, I mean, the gut is when we talk about the microbiome in the gut, it's really like the soil in your body. So you talk about all the changes that are happening in the soil around, and you could see that if the soil is depleted, if the soil is not in a healthy state, that you can't grow crops, it doesn't produce, good, good outcome in terms of the plant life. And for us, life starts in the gut. Like even in the formation embryologically, it's like the gut is the first thing that forms, and everything kind of grows out of that. And in terms of the food, like that's the place that all the nutrients, all the activity is starting in terms of the health of your body. That's what's extracting everything that allows you to exist, is the gut. So to have dysfunction there would naturally impact everything else going on in your body. And the fact that we talk about like the bidirectional connection between, like, through the vagus, between the brain and the gut, and how there's this relationship where there's an interplay of the health of the gut is then having the ability to support better mental health and a better status. It's definitely the starting point. And then with stress, it's the opposite way, that whatever you have going on psychologically, that can again have this other control in terms of the gut health and impacting the integrity of the lining and just the overall functioning of that system. And so, keeping both in a good place is definitely key to optimizing your brain health.
Well, and I love what you say. It helps to give the understanding of, even if I'm eating optimally, even if I'm eating incredibly healthy, whole foods, to check all the boxes with the nutrients, if my gut's not in a good, healthy state, then I'm not necessarily able to take advantage of the nutrients that I'm ingesting. I'm not necessarily able to break them down and absorb them to get the benefit of it. Would you say, we talk about, or you mentioned that the bidirectional aspect of things. Is there research to show that stress also drives inflammation, that something physiological or psychological can have a physiological impact driving inflammation, not just from the foods we eat or pathogens or bacteria or viruses in our body?
Yeah, there's definitely connections, Peter, if you want to.
Yeah, I mean, when we think about stress, right? We think about, let's say a bear comes after you, right? It runs after you. It looks like it's going to eat you, right? Your body gets scared, feels threatened, and it moves into what's called fight or flight mode, right? Your body shifts into this mode where it sends energy to your brain, to your heart, to your muscles, and it's ready to fight or it's ready to run. And what it also does, the body is very smart, so it takes the resources from what you don't need in the moment, which is the digestive tract. So when you're running from a bear, you're not going to sit down and take some time to eat a meal. So your body shuts down your gut, puts the resources where it needs it to fight or run. And that's fine in the moment if there's an actual bear and you run away and we go back to our home and we feel safe. But, most of us are living every day kind of stressed out. We're running from this to that. We're not getting enough sleep, maybe probably not drinking enough water. We're worried about family. We're worried about, our job, lots of stressors. So our bodies don't realize that we're not running from a bear. So it keeps our gut chronically shut. So as you mentioned before, Rebecca, you eat healthy foods, but if the gut isn't ready to receive those foods and they don't break down properly, then they break down into these molecules that the immune system in the gut sees as not good, because they weren't broken down properly. So that starts that inflammatory process. And then chronically, as that stays inflamed, it ends up seeping into our system, into our bloodstream, up to our brain, creates inflammation in other places. And if we're genetically disposed to something like mental health issues, it's going to definitely kick that off even quicker. So there is a really strong relationship, and there's a lot of research now that bears this out, this idea. It's funny, 20 something years ago, I remember talking at a medical school about leaky gut and different health issues. And I remember two of the residents were kind of laughing, thinking, and one raised their hand and said, "That's just ridiculous. I've never heard that before." And I remember thinking, well, it's in the literature, and now today it's really second nature to know, people know this now. And so it's taken a while to get into the mainstream medicine, but it's there, and it's a really clear relationship between stress and mood.
Yeah.
Just to piggyback on that, and so when you look at the gut biome, we talk about the diversity of the organisms in there, and certain organisms are tied to different presentations. Also, that people going through psychological issues, then when you look at their gut biome, you see that there's a correlation between the mental health state and the actual objective, organisms that you're seeing in terms of the patterns, and that healthier people have more diversity in terms of the, which organisms are there. So there are studies where they've made these connections, these correlations, and it is bidirectional.
Fascinating. And think about that, when we think about the term resilience, so to have more resilience in your mental health, more resilience in your physical health really comes down to diverse, healthy gut biome.
Absolutely.
So many of the people that join us are often parents of kids. So when we think about gut health and we think about, what it is that feeding kids on a busy schedule, on a budget, picky eaters, it's a lot, right? It's not easy. And we always say at Brain Balance, there is no shame, there is no judgment. We're just here to really focus on what can we help to do to decrease inflammation, increase full healthy foods. What are some thoughts you would share with parents to say, okay, here's a few things that you can be doing at home, foods to work into your diet regularly that are kid friendly to help foster that healthy gut at a young age, and talk a little bit about the importance of gut health in youth and how that impacts us going forward.
Yeah, but I'll let maybe Peter take some of that. But before we get into that, a precursor to that is, regardless of the status of the gut, when it comes to mental health, I think it's so important to look objectively at the nutrition panels for kids or for any patient, right? Because part of the concern with the inflammation is the body's having problems with absorbing, processing the nutrients and getting it into your system at adequate levels. And for the work that we've done, we've seen these clear connections between certain issues in terms of lab deficiencies. Again, and it's a deficiency for a reason. You can look up in the Merck manual, like if you have this deficiency, it connects to these different symptoms, and some of those are mental health symptoms that we're seeing. And so regardless of the reason that a person might be having trouble absorbing those nutrients, be it the micro or macronutrients, whatever it is, to just ensure that they're getting that and seeing how they're presenting from a mental health perspective is key. So I think you can do that as you address and resolve the gut health issues. You can still get objective labs to say this person is adequate B vitamins, they have adequate D, whatever it is. You can truly find that, at least that regardless of what's happening in the gut, that they're at a place where their body has the basic foundational building blocks to function, as you're then working on all the work to address the inflammation going on.
Sure.
Peter, you wanna?
Yeah, and with kids, to answer the question, the first thing is obviously talking with the parents, and I like to learn a bit about what the parents' views on foods are, because oftentimes, the children's health, children they have such a beautiful vital force, right? They're just so strong, and they kind of get sick kind of quickly. They also get better quickly, typically, and so they're usually a stronger reflection of just sort of the energy and the food and things that are going on in the house. So I like to check in with the parents first and find out, well, what do they like to eat, and what do they believe in? Because oftentimes, when we try to make changes with children's health, it's really about working with parents, right? So that's I find the overarching, if we can, get the parents on board, then it's not, kids are interesting because they know when they don't feel good, and I see so many children that I'll talk to the kids directly, with the parents there, and ask them about, when you eat this food, how do you feel? Or if you don't eat it for a couple of days, how do you feel? And they see it, and once they make that connection, they're ready to make the change, So it's oftentimes the parents sometimes are, the ones you kind of have to bring on board and just, and of course it's understandable. We grow up a certain way. We grow up eating the foods we ate, either culturally or just, things we enjoyed. And so a lot of us will say, well, I ate this and I was fine. I didn't have, but I think as time goes on, we're learning that, conditions like that manifest in different ways. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting that you touched on that. I never would have realized that I react to gluten if it weren't for my son. And I think we're going to do things, we're going to do the hard work for our kids before we often put ourselves first and do the work for ourselves. But when my son was 2, there were some things cropping up and we just weren't getting to the bottom of it. And you know, trying to sort it all out and figure it all out. And finally somebody said to me, well, have you ever thought about cutting out gluten? And I was like, no, but all right, let's try. Within 2 days, everything started clearing up and it was like a light switch. It was night and day. And so I thought, okay, well, if we're going to do this, I need to wrap my head around it to understand it. And so I'm going to do it with him so that I'm not going to cook 4 different meals for the family. And so I was going to live it with him to figure out how to navigate it and to understand. And then sure enough, as soon as it cleared out of my system and I didn't have it for a long time, and then I had it again, it was like, oh, okay, well, he's not the only one in the family that shouldn't be eating gluten. And so it is, but I needed to be equipped to know what gluten was, how to avoid it, how I could, not just replace it with ultra processed other things. How do we avoid it and replace it with nutritious things? But it does come down to the parent being able to implement it and having the time, energy, and know-how to be able to do that.
Yeah, and also I think along those lines is also teaching kids that when it comes to nutrition, it's not consistent with the flavor. So things that taste good, that you want to consume, that there is something lacking, and for them from an early age to really disconnect that joy of the experience of the food versus the core nutrients that you're trying to get, and for them to at least understand that that's true, that this is a treat and it tastes delicious, but it's not going to help you, feel good or be, get big and strong. That this thing may not taste as wonderful, but it's going to make you feel wonderful, and having that for them to get the logic, and for parents to get that logic too.
I think that's tough messaging. Nutrition's always been something that's been so important to me. And I think I was so black and white with it with my kids when they were little, to the point where one time my daughter saw me holding a can of Coke and I literally had like 3 sips of Coke and she was like, oh no, mommy. And I was like, oh, okay, we need to be balanced here. And so I tried to pivot the message to food first. What does our brain and body need to be healthy? And it's not that, I don't want to make food good and bad, but, and we work hard on that at Brain Balances. Let's educate to know what are healthier options. What is it that your brain and body needs to feel better? But I don't want, if my daughter has a Coke, I don't want her to feel guilty and feel bad and have feelings of shame. But what can I do to ensure that I'm setting my brain and body up for success, but finding that middle ground where it's not so cut and dry, I think is hard.
Yeah, I think it's gotten easier because I think manufacturers are starting to get the message. Now you have sodas with prebiotic that have less sugar in them. The food is organic and more nutrient dense. Like people like that messaging of how to really engineer food in these healthier ways, and the gluten-free options have grown exponentially. So the messaging, it's much easier to do it today, and the messaging is out there versus the way it was decades ago.
Yeah, it's true. And I think, if people feel really challenged, what I try to do with our patients is really not so much focus on don't eat this and don't eat that, but if they feel really challenged, start by focusing on maybe things they're not getting that they should start getting in, that are just healthy and healing and nutritive, and water as an example. Most of us don't drink water, and there's studies that show that there's a much higher level of anxiety and depression when you're dehydrated. Tryptophan can't get into the brain, you don't make serotonin. So sometimes just starting with the basics of things that need to get in there versus really focusing on don't eat this and don't eat that can work for a lot of families, especially when they're just starting out.
That's exactly what we've learned from our nutrition team at Brain Balance. So our team of registered dietitians and nutritionists, they work with thousands of families every year, and they really said it's easier for families to add something before to take something away. And so how can we add more hydration of just water? It doesn't need to be Gatorade and sugary drinks. And how do we increase hydration? How do we increase the number of whole healthy foods, and starting there Shifting gears, I'm just curious. So both of you practicing in the way that you've been practicing in a holistic, integrative, but combining multiple different resources together. What have you found most surprising in your practice, and what are some of the common themes and trends that have really stood out for you?
For me, the surprises were seeing some common medical conditions that were underlying psychiatric conditions. Like, so seeing, for example, how many people had B12 deficiencies that had cognitive deficits that people might have thought were attention deficit, but that were truly like a B12 deficiency, which is known to cause like cognitive deficits, like it's right there in the Merck manual. Or the number of people with thyroid disorders that were diagnosed as bipolar, but that had clear, objective, lab confirmed thyroid disorder, and that historically they would have been treated as as having that condition, versus people really seeing that there was this endocrinological source of their symptoms versus just treating them with the mood stabilizers. So I think that those things were definitely confirmations for me in terms of like this approach is so essential to really understanding and thinking about mental health.
I think from the patient perspective, that just would empower me in such a different way of, okay, I have the ability to make sure I'm getting my B vitamins and that my body's absorbing that, and that's going to make a difference on my ability to focus, block out distractions, regulate mood and emotions. I mean, we all want to understand why, what's happening, what can I do about it? And I think getting to that root cause can be inspiring and empowering. Peter, same question for you.
Yeah, you said surprising. I guess the thing that's very surprising, I guess in the sense not, is every patient is so different. And when a patient comes in, it's so important for me to not pre-think it and think, oh, they're coming in with this, they come in or they have to get rid of gluten or something, and that's the reason, I like prejudge it. I had a patient the other day who had a hyperthyroid. You mentioned hyperthyroidism, made me think of this, and we went through the whole intake, and my tact is to really just get the story and really find out about the basics. Are they sleeping? Are they exercising? What are their stressors? What foods are they eating? Of course, vitamins are taking, all this, and get the whole story, do labs, and really get a sense of all the factors. So I try not to really think what I think might be going on until we do all that, because sometimes it'll sway me in the wrong direction. And we were talking, and at the end, we were talking about medications. We're just about at the end, an hour and a half into the visit, right? We're just about done. And this woman tells me, she goes, "Oh, I've also been using this retinoic acid, a skin. It's a type of vitamin A. Been using for many, many years." And I thought about it, and I'm like, oh, that's interesting, because, I remember learning how hyperthyroidism can be helped with vitamin A. And I'm thinking, I wonder if that different version of vitamin A might be an issue for the. So I went and I looked it up after, and I found this literature about how retinoic acid, that version of it, can affect the conversion of T4 to T3, which is the hormones that the thyroid makes. And one is the more active, the T3. And it can raise it substantially. And because this particular woman had a type of hyperthyroidism which didn't show high antibodies, which made me wonder why. And so, so I've really learned you have to get all the information, and you have to really not prejudge, and just really let the information just sort of sort itself out, and then just start working on the factors that seem reasonable, because it's so different for everybody. And that's what's so exciting for me, and so surprising every day. I've been doing this for 22 years, and yesterday, when I thought about it, it was kind of exciting, because I was like, oh, here's something new. I didn't know that, and that's just so surprising. And we were talking earlier off about our children, and wanting them to be happy, and I do wish that for all our kids, and and for everyone, like just doing something you love like that, and being so surprised about the work, and so anyway, that's
I love it. You get to play detective at work every day.
Yeah.
You know, talking about the kids, we were sharing, all three of us have told us about the same age, in that 16, 17-year-old age. Given the work that you do, what are one or two things that you've really focused on with your kids and your family, instilling or providing in terms of ensuring and supporting their mental health and well-being?
That's a really great question. I think making sure the foundation of their health, so that there's an understanding for, in terms of what is healthy and not healthy. So at least empowers them to make a choice. So rather than saying you must eat this and you must, like, how do you feel? Like, you ate that thing, how do you feel now? Like, you're feeling drowsy and out of it. Well, that's not healthy, and why don't you try this instead? So empowering them that way. I think, we haven't talked about it, it's not really on topic, but I think social media is a massive part. It's a challenge that they're all facing, and all the information and guidance they're getting, and the reference for that information is just so off base now. So really trying to, in the same way I try to do with food, I try to also give that empowerment by saying, what's the reference for what you're seeing, and how much time is being consumed by this, and is this the best use of time, and did you get out of it what you wanted? So I think that that's important. And also the other thing, caveat from the social media, is also socialization. Who are you spending your time with? Who are you engaging with? So I think that that's so key for being happy.
Lovely.
Yeah,
Peter?
well said. I would add that, and I see with so many youngsters, young patients, just not getting enough sleep and staying on social media till late, looking at these screens, not getting a good quality sleep. I think that's so detrimental to so many young people, as well as adults. And so I think one of the things that my daughter, is definitely understands the benefits of getting enough sleep. And so I think that's quite important. And then the idea of ultra processed foods, now there's so much research about ultra processed foods in teens, and in terms of cognitive function, their ability to learn, attention issues, behavioral issues, and again, not this idea of you can't ever have this, but as Jacques said earlier, this is a treat food every once in a while. But these are the foods we eat regularly, like good quality whole foods is what we eat most often, with the treat every once in a while, to enjoy. And I think those are just really good fundamentals for children's bodies.
Yeah, and it's easier said than done, right? With being parents with kids on the go in sports and job and schools, trying to feed them on the fly, and when you're trying to grab something cheap and quick and easy that the kids will eat, it's hard to walk into a gas station and find something that's not ultra processed. And so you take
True.
just a few minutes. I don't want to make any assumptions about knowledge. Define what an ultra processed food is, and why there's such wear and tear, and why the impact and inflammation in the body.
Yeah, so an ultra processed food is basically a food that's typically processed in such a way. Like, you could take a look, for example, there's wheat germ, right? So when we grow wheat, I'm talking about gluten, right? There's this wheat germ, and what we basically do to it to process it is, we pulverize it, take out pretty much all the nutrients in the process, bleach it, it becomes this white flour, and then we make a bread out of it that's pretty much devoid of nutrients, to the point where many years ago, the government decided, well, we need to start enriching these foods with vitamins because we took them all out. And unfortunately, enriching them with pretty poor quality vitamins at that, which can honestly cause more trouble than help. And that's basically an ultra processed food. So it's a food that's been stripped of anything of value, and is just usually just empty carbohydrates, and contributes to imbalances in blood sugar, typically contributes to weight gain, contributes to inflammation in the body, with little nutritive value at the same time.
When you have something and you see it rotting, that tells you that the bacteria can digest it, it can process it. And what we've done to our food is, you can leave it on the shelf, and it's meaning
Right,
all the bacteria that's landing on it, that's there, is unable to process and digest it.
It won't grow on it.
That
That's so,
bacteria is the same kind of bacteria that's in our gut. It shares the same organelles. It shares the
so
same
true.
structure. The same way that we've structured food in a way that it doesn't rot, we've also structured food that doesn't digest. And
So if
so
the environment can't break it down, our body's not going to be able to break it down either.
exactly, you're not breaking it down. You're not getting the nutrients. You're getting the flavor. It's designed to be optimized for the receptors in your mouth for the flavor in that experience, but it's not designed for the digestion process. And that's part of what the challenge is.
Yeah.
When I get this community supported agriculture during the spring, summer, and fall, from an organic farm out here in Long Island where I live, and the food is so fresh, and you get like a head of lettuce and there's like bugs in it, and there's and I like that, because like there's they're like living bugs in there because there aren't pesticides that are killing them off and maybe slowly killing me off at the same time. So it's
Yeah, and
Jacques'
one
point.
important thing, one footnote that I want to add is I think for people who are fine, who are eating processed food, drinking Coca-Cola, and they're happy and they're good, it's okay to continue doing that, right? So I don't think the issue is to say everyone must stop eating this stuff and you all have to eat gluten-free and you can't have that's not what we're saying. We're saying it's some people are more sensitive to these changes, and that sensitivity, the mental health presentation is one facet of your health, and there's something that these foods are doing that are destroying your overall health. The mental health is just a piece of it, but it's just having these damaging effects. And if you're one of those people, you want to make a change, because not only will it improve your mind, it's going to improve your overall body, your health in general. That's why you want to make the change. If you're one of the people who you're like George Burns, you're smoking a cigar, you're eating steak, having a Coca-Cola, like Warren Buffett and his Coca-Cola and peanut M&Ms, that's okay. And I think there's some people who I think the reason there's been such a backlash is there's people who become such evangelists. They're like, everyone has to live this way. It's like, no, everyone doesn't have to live this way. If you're suffering, before we load you up with a ton of medications, why don't we try these changes, which we think will help? In addition to the medication, we can come up with a good treatment plan. But I think it's important for people to know that if you're fine, you're happy, it's okay to live your life the way you want to.
Yeah, I love what you said. Mental health presentation is one facet of health. We have our physical health, we have our cognitive health, we have our mental health, and I think you can't separate them. They all work together. For me, just an aha moment, which is kind of a duh moment, but really understanding the connection between cognitive health, our brain health, and heart health. Where these things are just all interrelated, and you cannot separate them. And I think you're right, where some of us are far more susceptible to things than others, but I think we also need to look at it from the perspective of what's your goal. If your goal is to improve attention, focus, mood, and regulation, are we actively taking steps to set us up for success in achieving those goals? What are the things that I can control in my daily life that may contribute to meeting those goals? And increasing hydration, increasing sleep, decreasing ultra processed foods and added sugars. I love knowing the things that I can influence and implement in my daily life. We're getting close to time, and I know we're going to have a ton of questions. Victoria, if you're able to jump on and share, and I forgot to say that at the beginning, a couple disclaimers. I forgot to say this is not medical advice. Before you make any changes, consult with your physician. And you're welcome to type in questions that we can have Dr. Jacques and Peter answer for us.
Yeah, I'd love to start out. Dr. Jospitre, can you tell us just a little bit about if someone's interested in Soho MD? I know you have practitioners who can practice all over the country from what I've seen. Do you want to just give a little bit of a plug about how they can get in touch with you all?
Yeah, thanks a lot. So we have our website, sohomd.com. The phone number is on the website as well. We're in 20 states, and we've trained, we have both therapists and prescribers, and the prescribers have been trained to think from an integrative perspective, where they're able to send labs on patients, and that's why I really kept going back to the fact that we like to see objective measures, and based on those results, we're able to make adjustments and recommendations that incorporate the integrative health functional medicine perspective. So we have objective data to kind of underpin the thinking around how we can optimize people's brain health. And it also helps us identify medical causes of psychiatric symptoms, and for us to come up with standard medical treatment plans that we were all trained on, but just aren't applied usually in psychiatry. So we incorporate that into the care that we offer to patients.
Thank you so much. Dr. Bongiorno, I was hoping, we had a parent who asked, what's the best way to check if you have leaky gut?
Yeah, so there's a few ways to do it. Typically, if there's inflammation in the body, oftentimes there's some level of leaky gut. If people have painful joints, if there's rashes and skin issues, oftentimes there's a level of leaky gut. There is a test. There's a stool test that's quite easy to run. You just collect some poop and you send it to the lab, and it looks for something called zonulin. And basically, when the intestinal cells are attached together, there's this zonulin that sits there as part of the attachment. When there's a lot of inflammation in the gut, they break apart, and the zonulin kind of comes out and can go into the stool, and you can check that. So that is one way to look for leaky gut, and it's probably the most objective way to do that, is doing that stool test.
Okay, thank you. We have a couple different questions around the relationship between psychiatry, medication, and a nutrition approach or naturopathic approach. And I was hoping that maybe we could talk a little bit about how those different approaches in your integrative approach can kind of work together, and how you, I guess, approach that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a great question. I think that what happened in psychiatry is that we got into the brands and labels for different medications and got away from the molecular mechanism at play. So for example, when we talk about SSRIs, right, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, it's a medication that's designed to help impact the reuptake of serotonin. So in psychiatry, for us, we like to think about the whole metabolic pathway of serotonin. What are all the nutrients that helps your body make serotonin, and produce it properly and store it? And then this is a medication that's impacting one piece of it. So why not look at the whole thing and say, are you supporting your ability to make it before we talk about your ability to increase it through blocking the reuptake inhibitor? So we're really thinking about the biochemistry of everything, the biochemistry of the medications we're offering to patients, along with the nutrients and other functional medicine or alternative approaches that we're taking. So we're putting it all together in terms of the science. So like you talk about GABA, so you talk about benzodiazepines working on the GABA receptor. We can also talk about magnesium and the impact it has in terms of being inhibitory for different signals. And again, thinking at the molecular level, how do all these things interplay? And that's how we put it together. So there's a science there, and that's what Peter was mentioning. There's a literature behind these alternative approaches to care, and there's a literature in terms of the mechanism that is used for psychiatric medications to work. That can all be put together into one unified system that's all grounded in science.
I love that. So it doesn't have to be so black and white of you're doing medication or you're not doing medication. There's a time and place for all things. And again, what tools do we have in our tool belt to find the best path forward?
Exactly.
Yeah, and what does the patient need at that time? It's nice to talk about food and getting enough sleep, but if you're talking about someone who's really, has some, real challenges in life and has to work 2 jobs and take care of children and no time for shopping, sometimes starting with a medication is appropriate. It helps them feel better, they get more stable, and then they can sit down and go, okay, let me work on my food, let me work on, my water. And so it's all about what's best for the patient at that time. It's all good and it's all useful, and it just, matching it to what the patient needs is really the most important.
Well, and I love that that's a short-term and a long-term approach. What do you need to get through the day-to-day? And then big picture, where do we want to land and how do we get there?
Exactly. All valid tools, as you were saying, Rebecca. We're not only alternative only medication. We're saying they work together, and you just have to know how to use them properly.
Thank you both. I mean, I think it aligns so much with what we do at Brain Balance, which is, so many children come to us while on medication. and trying to optimize brain health and improve brain connectivity and take a holistic approach, and saying that it's okay that you're on medication and attempt to improve things.
Yeah,
And
if the medication works for a patient, that teaches us, wow, that pathway really is important. Maybe it's a medication that raised dopamine and norepinephrine, like some of the focus medications. So then we could sit back and say, okay, well, what else can we do that's more natural that'll do that? And there's a lot of literature about that, about herbs to use, about optimizing sleep, about exercise optimization. I mean, so it's, so oftentimes the medications, when they help, they can lead us to even better natural and integrative treatments too. So.
Yeah, and an example or an analogy I use for patients and for parents is I think of medications like glasses, right? So you can take vitamin A and say vitamin A will improve the health of your eyes, but at the same time you need glasses to really give you that proper vision. And so it's external, it's not natural, it didn't come from a tree, it's artificial, but it's essential for living your best life. And sometimes medication has a role in your life the same way glasses do.
Beautifully said.
I was just about to say beautiful analogy. I love that so much. We have a few questions coming through, and I love this question, but in your approach in terms of women versus men, or any trends that you might see, are there any things that either you always do or you may see more often in, say, for example, depression in men versus women, or focus issues in men versus women?
It's a great question. Just off the bat, the first thing is hormone. Birth control, IUDs, oral birth controls, contraceptive medication. That it can have significant connections to mental health issues. So I've had patients where that was the source of their mental health issues was the contraception they were using, the hormonal contraception. And so for some patients, they have sensitivity, and so that's a clear-cut one. And then also menopause. How many people start experiencing mental health issues that are purely founded on the hormonal changes that are occurring as they age, and that really being the source. And for us, not having best practices around how to deal with it. And so that is just just an off the bat clear thing I see. And then also with just more in terms of maybe social pressures or just societal expectations in terms of how men deal with emotional health issues, the fact that they tend to maybe have more unhealthy ways of dealing with it, have fewer people to converse with about whatever they're going through. And so, like, for example, 3/4 of our patients are female. So the men, they might be going out to the bar, having a drink, and and that's how they're managing with their emotional health issues, while the females are coming in and making appointments to talk to someone. So I think that those are the differences that I see.
Interesting. And it's not because there's a difference in statistics that align that more females are struggling with mental health, and then it's just you're seeing more people actively reaching out for care and help.
Yeah.
100%. And to piggyback on that, I think that's why it's so important to run like more advanced testing to look at hormones, to look at adrenal health and cortisol levels and all of these things that can really help us, ferret out like really where are the physiologic imbalances and how can we support those. You talk about hormones, like hormones help the brain make neurotransmitters, right? For example, so it's so important to kind of tease that out and understand for each individual.
We have a lot of different questions coming through about specific nutrients. And so, I think I kind of want to just circle back on a couple of things that you both said. I know that you do some really thorough testing to identify specific nutrients that you might need to work on, or vitamins, and why. Are there any, just fundamentals that if a lot of the parents that have joined today have kids, some are much younger, that are just like kind of principles to good mental health, good focus, good emotional regulation that you see over and over again?
I think as Peter was saying before, each patient is so unique and different. But I think the ability to help your child have a healthy, balanced diet, making sure that they're getting adequate sleep and hydration, as we were talking about, making sure that they're not overscheduled. I think in the modern day, a good parent feels like the kid needs to be in every single activity from, morning to night. And so that can be stressful for kids, and you have to get to know the personality of your kid. If the kid's the one who wants to do it, that's one thing. But if you're the one kind of dragging the kid and forcing them, that stress could be having some mental health issues. So I think that those are the foundational lifestyle issues. And I think, and nutrition in terms of the diet, but I think also looking at some basic, supplements that, because I do think that they're basic things like a good multivitamin, good amount of magnesium. There's some basic things that can be done. Again, people have to talk to their clinicians. I'm not saying this as medical advice, but I'm saying that there's some basic things that you can do to make sure nutritionally your kid is getting everything they need. They're getting hydrated, they're sleeping well. I think that's the starting point to see how they really are doing before you say they have a mental health condition.
100%. If I was to add, typical lab for a child, I would certainly include just looking at red blood cells, iron levels, B12 levels, vitamin D levels, zinc levels. I know Dr. J taught me the importance of even looking into lead. Can be really valuable with the kids too. So I don't like running tons of tests on kids, the little bodies, you want to draw a lot of blood from them, but those couple to start with, I think are reasonable places to look for a lot of children. And water is probably the most important basic nutrient.
I love the statistic that just a 2% drop in your hydration can have an impact on cognition. It's so tremendously important and a really great place to start. Well, thank you both. I mean, this was just a treasure trove of great nuggets of information and insights. Thank you for sharing your backgrounds and your experience with all of us. We all have areas that we could improve so that we could support our overall brain health, mental health, and well-being. And hopefully everybody gets to leave here today with a little something to help make a difference in their daily lives.
Yeah, thanks for having us on.
Thank you for the work you're doing and spreading so much good information.
Absolutely.
Thank you.